So there's a bunch of theories about how the election will go down.
I just have
and
no
a
idea.
lot of people think that it's going to end up in the courts with lawsuits about various elections, and that will ultimately lead to the Supreme Court, and will have to go fast because there's a deadline.
Yep.
So at least according to one of the sources I was reading on Potentials, they say the deadline I think is like December 14th. I'm not entirely sure, but that's when the electoral vote, the electoral college votes have to be tallied.
Yeah, okay.
And that's when they decide, the Supreme Court will have to intervene or not. So I imagine they will. If we do not have a full court and it could potentially go 4-4, then this country is going to face the worst crisis it's faced in 100 plus years.
Yeah. And even if everything goes well, it could be a unanimous court and it would still be a crisis, right? And I think one of the important things to keep in mind for the election is it really is 50 different simultaneous elections that go on simultaneously under their own different set of rules, right? We're talking about Pennsylvania throwing out the signature verification. So you have all of these different kind of minute factors of the law that are all legal challenges that could all get fast-tracked. And so just the number of cases that could spin out, the amount of energy that would have to go into this is enormous. What if we come out of Election Day, we're 3 or 4 days post, and we don't know because of mail-in irregularities or whatever it is, we don't know who won Florida, we don't know who won Pennsylvania, and I don't know, we don't know who won Wisconsin.
Could that be, so when we've talked about civil war, and I got to preface this by saying, I know there's a lot of people who are like, they roll their eyes when it's brought up. But I'm not the one who I didn't come up with this idea. I was reading a national security article from I think The Atlantic talking about the violence in the streets, the escalation of tensions following Donald Trump's victory, and the potential for civil war. And this was several years ago. They said that it looked like there was like a 35% chance we would go down that route. A lot of people I talked to said there's no dividing line. Like the American Civil War was the North and the South. We knew where people were. And I said, but that's not a traditional civil war like we've seen with other countries around the world, where there's pockets that are in alignment and then they like move around and then slowly try and take over one city, or where they just wage a war on the capital until they win control of the centralized, government.
Right.
I wonder if that scenario you just brought up would be that state dividing line, because we have a lot of swing states that have, I shouldn't say a lot, but there's a couple where they have a Democratic governor but a Republican legislature.
Right.
So I think Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and not
Michigan.
Pennsylvania. It's Michigan and Wisconsin, I think.
Yeah.
So I wonder what happens if there's these Democratic governors who will say something like, imagine this. I keep seeing the left say, many progressives, that we need to make sure we have maximum voter turnout for Joe Biden. The only problem is they all live in blue states. They all live in deep blue states,
right,
and heavily concentrated in cities. So a lot of people did move because of COVID, but I don't think they moved that far.
Yeah.
They probably went to their parents' house in the suburbs or something like that.
Right.
If they all come out and vote, so what? New York, which was already going to give its electoral votes, has a higher, popular vote count.
Yeah.
So what? However, what happens when Joe Biden loses the electoral college but wins the popular vote by 10 points? Then you're going to see these Democrat governors in the swing states be like, well, we did vote for, Trump in our state, but the popular vote of the country is more important because the swing is too high.
Right.
You'll end up with some people saying, we know Trump won the electoral college, but this is too big of a popular vote swing. We will not be ruled by a minority.
Right.
And then the Republicans and Trump are going to say, these are the rules.
These are the rules. Yep.
And this is what we all agreed to. And then all of a sudden you have some kind of civil war.
But I think so. Two thoughts come to me. The first is, I think the response from the left will be, yeah, well, we agreed to these rules hundreds of years ago when there was still slavery, right? That's always the pushback on the Electoral College. And there's a side of me that's like, okay, I get it. Like, we have a living, breathing constitutional document. It's meant to change, all that kind of stuff. But there's a lot of things you have to go through to change things in this country. And I think on the whole, that's probably for the best, Electoral College included. But getting back to your Civil War model. I read something the other day that was really, really interesting that looked at it, that talked about it less as a traditional civil war, even in the sense of two standing armies, even if it's not north-south, but like even look at a place like Libya, right? That kind of devolves into a sort of civil war, and a lot more like the Troubles in Ireland. Right. And so it could look a lot more like you have kind of pockets of sectarian violence where you have, it's not even one city against another. It's you got 60% of one city, maybe that's loyal to a cause, and 40% the other way. And so you start having, unfortunately, what it ends up looking like is a lot like Portland with more people dead.
And live ammo. I remember I went to Northern Ireland. What's the city in Northern Ireland? Do you know?
Belfast.
Belfast.
Yeah.
Yes, I was in Belfast, and I went to the Peace Wall.
Crawled there. Oh.
Did you go to the Peace Wall?
I did. Yeah.
All right. So this is really important for everyone that's listening. On one side of the peace wall, there was like pro-Israel stuff. On the other side, there was pro-Palestine. And I was confused by this. And I asked one of the locals, what does this have to do with Ireland? And he said, nothing.
Yeah.
It was literally tribalism. If one side said one thing, the other side said the opposite.
Yep.
We are seeing that. It's Matt Taibbi called it, there's something akin to this that Matt Taibbi coined, the hydroxychloroquine effect.
Yes, right.
You read that article?
Yes. Oh, I love it. He's brilliant.
Right. He's a liberal guy.
Yeah.
And he wrote basically that, look, Trump sees these studies that were being performed in many different modernized nations.
Yep.
He then goes up on the podium and starts, saying, oh, this is really, really great. I saw this thing. We should try it out.
Yeah.
The media then ran as fast as they could to write stories claiming it was bad and not to do it.
Right.
And he said, you're in a pandemic and you're discounting a potential treatment that other countries, that's ridiculous.
And right off the bat, too, 2 threads I'll tell you I actually have about the hydroxychloroquine effect. And it's right. I mean, there was nothing about it that was science. And what ended up happening was all they had to do was cherry pick doctors who have a doctor before their name, throw them on CNN, and then they run the coverage of Trump. And let's be honest, too. Trump is not a medical expert. And so when he goes up there and talks about it, it's typical Trump speech trying to explain something very complicated, and then all of these doctors who probably are sound and look a lot more articulate on the ways of medicine get up there and say no, he's crazy, but they're cherry picking. They're just finding guys who believe a certain thing that doesn't necessarily fit any of the evidence. And
there was and there were some really bad doctors who came out in agreement with Trump that made him look really bad.
Very good point.
However, you also had Dr. I think it was Harvey Rich MD PhD from Yale saying the most important thing, whenever we talk about this too, because YouTube likes to strike down anybody who brings it up, is that it's not a cure. But this PhD MD from Yale was saying it does help, and we need to start looking into what we can do to help people, but it's not a cure for sure. So anyway, I bring that up in context of Northern Ireland because there was I think somebody in Northern Ireland claimed they were a lost tribe of Israel, and they were literally Irish people.
Interesting.
This is what I was being told by some of the locals. That you'll look on one side and it's the revolution fist, it's pro-communist, it's pro-left. The other side was pro-right-wing, pro-empire, pro-imperialism.
Yeah.
And it was literally just your side bad, our side good.
Interesting.
And I think that's where we are. But here's what I think when it comes to the U.S. and the kind of the conflict we've seen from the left and the right. The right has become a big tent of people who are rational and reasonable and willing to have a conversation and don't just believe that whatever one person says, we must say the other thing. But if you look, when I look at Trump, I say there's a lot of things I can easily criticize. There's a lot of things I think that are good. Hey, it is what it is. The left just says literally everything he does is bad.
Right.
The peace agreements, they're actually bad. They undermine Palestine. How dare he?
Yeah.
It looks like we're headed in that similar direction to what divided. At least what I saw from look, it's not like I have a history degree in Northern Ireland or anything.
Fair, but I think one of the big things within that too is you end up with a situation where it's not just that one side has decided that whatever the other side is doing is bad. Is you have one side who's in power, right, Donald Trump, and you have the other side who's controlling the narrative and the media,
right.
And so if they're going to sit back and say whatever the government of the United States does is bad, right, in a way that can only be described as propaganda, then of course you're going to inflame tensions. Of course you're going to piss people off. And at the end of the day, anyone who agrees with Trump is going to sit back and say, why am I being lied to?
So what do you think happens when Trump then selects his Supreme Court nominee? The media is going to magically create every possible, you name it. They're going to accuse this person of murder. They're going to be like, they kidnapped a puppy and threw it into, off a bridge. It's going to be insanity.
Yep.
But this is why I think Trump has to pick Amy Coney Barrett.
I think you're right.
If they choose a man, it's going to be Me Too. It's going to be white.
Worse.
Right, Kavanaugh all over again times
1,000.
Yeah, times 1,000.
Times 1,000,
Way
and with
worse.
1,000 times the energy behind it to dig up anything that could be wrong or unsavory or whatever it is.
No, they're going to make it up.
And that's the thing. When all else fails, you know that they will.
So what can they make up? So here's what I've got pulled up. I got Wikipedia pulled up of Amy Coney Barrett.
Oh, yeah.
And there's a really important context here. They say Amy Coney Barrett is a United States Circuit judge of the United States Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit. Barrett is the first and only woman to occupy an Indiana seat on the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. Described as an originalist and textualist, Barrett's judicial philosophy has been likened to that of her late mentor and former boss, Justice Antonin Scalia. Barrett's scholarship focused on originalism, statutory interpretation, and I can't pronounce. Can you pronounce that? Stare
decisis.
Stare decisis.
Let the decision stand.
Interesting.
In Latin, yeah.
So that, what does that mean? Like you don't repeal or reverse other standings?
Right. It's that you tend to side with settled case law or previous court decisions.
So the question I guess I would ask, if that's true, do you think she wouldn't overturn Roe v. Wade? Or would she?
It's interesting. She was asked about this. I don't know if it's a confirmation hearing or what, but she's been asked throughout the years whether or not she believes in Roe v. Wade, whether or not it's settled law. I think she probably doesn't. I think...
You think she won't
I
reverse
don't
it?
think she will reverse Roe v. Wade. To be honest with you, I get what Tom Cotton's saying, and Tom Cotton's an elected official, so I think it's a lot easier for him to say that it needs to be overturned.
Yeah.
I think it would be enormously difficult. I think you would probably need a couple more conservative justices to actually overturn Roe v. Wade.
Yeah.
I don't buy it. Right? It's something that the conservative movement has fought for a long time, and done a really good job of fighting for. And I think it's animated the conservative movement for a really long time. But I don't think it changes. But to answer your earlier question, I think I have a pretty good idea of what's going to come out about Coney Barrett.
Oh, yeah?
I think I know.
Oh.
So she's Catholic. She teaches at Notre Dame, and they're going to paint her. And they did this the last time I think she was confirmed. They're going to paint her as a religious zealot.
Oh, yeah.
They're gonna. I think it might have been her. It might have been someone I'm confusing her with. But she has membership in different Catholic organizations. I think Opus Dei, maybe a couple of the others. You'll remember Opus Dei if you've seen the Da Vinci Code. That's not actually Opus Dei. They use
So
the name.
she's not like hiding secret paintings.
No, exactly. She's exactly right.
That'd be
She's
cool,
not.
though.
It would be cool if it was the case, but no. To the best of my knowledge, she doesn't have any interesting secrets. Doesn't drink the blood from the skull of St. Peter or anything like that.
Wow.
But she's a conservative Catholic woman.
Pro-gun.
Yeah, but also like deeply not fundamentalist, but fundamentally as in her bearing and in her being religious. That's what it's going to be. It's going to be a culture war about religion.
So I can see it already because Dianne Feinstein, this is the lady to whom she was saying the dogma lives loudly.
This is
within
Dogma
you.
Lives Loudly. Thank you.
I was
You're
like,
right.
yeah, okay, I
Interesting.
remember
This
now.
is Dogma
I can
Lives
see,
Loudly.
I can preview it through the Kavanaugh thing.
Yeah.
I'm not going to go through her entire wiki that points out several interesting things, but I will note that right away they say she's a wrongfully dissent in favor of gun ownership rights, but also Fourth Amendment. Interestingly, the first thing they bring up is Barrett wrote the opinion in a case denying summary judgment and qualified immunity to a police detective who knowingly provided false and misleading information in an affidavit.
Interesting.
The plaintiff, Rainsberger, was arrested for his own mother's murder based upon the defendant's falsified records used to secure a warrant for the plaintiff's arrest. The court found the defendant's lies and omissions were material to probably cause a clear violation of the plaintiff's Fourth Amendment rights, to which the defendant is not eligible for qualified immunity. So I legalese a little bit there, but does that she actually was against qualified immunity for a cop? Is that what it says?
Sort of. So if I'm reading it right, it's that. You have a lot of courts who have a pretty expansive interpretation of what qualified immunity is and what it means. And so if I'm reading that correctly, again, I don't have a law degree, so I don't want to mislead any of your viewers, but my understanding is that she struck down qualified immunity because of a direct violation of an enunciated protection that's under the Constitution, which not all courts do, right? I think unfortunately it's with.
Can you give quick context on qualified immunity?
Yeah, so qualified immunity is for certain people. In most cases, it comes up around police officers. Is that because of the responsibilities of their job or something that they do, it's a higher burden of proof to be able to hold them legally accountable. And so if you get killed by a police officer, it is very, very difficult for your family to then go and sue the government and sue the police bureau.
So this is something a lot of left-wing activists have been adamant about. They want police to lose qualified immunity,
right,
so that they get treated like regular people, essentially.
Yes, right.
So I guess that might be favorable for her. It's not like it's going to matter, though. She's a conservative.
That's a good point. Yeah, they'll hate her anyway. That point I think is good for the libertarians. That's been a big.
Yeah.
That's like Reason, I'm sure, has a podcast on qualified immunity or whatever it is. Right. That's one of their big sticking points. I think there's probably enough there in the rest of the wiki for why Coney Barrett is not going to be someone who's embraced with open arms by any RPG fans.
Right away, the 2A gun ownership rights stuff, of course. If she's an originalist and textualist, I mean, but it's interesting. She's an originalist and textualist, but she's not going to reverse, previous rulings. Is that what? Stare decisis, I think is.
Yeah, stare decisis. So it's interesting. I think the two are somewhat in tension, right? You've got something. So stare decisis is yes, you're not overturning previous court decisions. I think there is a long legal tradition among originalists to say that you don't want to the whole point of originalism, particularly as a political manifestation, is we shouldn't be legislating from the bench. We shouldn't be making laws and making rules and changing things based on the judicial philosophy of individual courts. Right, that's kind of the crux and the heart of it. But what I think a lot of originalists and textualists will do is they'll say that doesn't mean that we can't look at cases that were wrongly decided.
Right.
And go back and say this was wrong and we need to change it, rather than we're looking at all the same facts and figures and it comes out differently. So I think that's about where it nets out.
there is a section for possible Supreme Court nomination. And they say Barrett had been included on President Donald Trump's list of potential Supreme Court nominees since 2017, almost immediately after her Court of Appeals confirmation. That's wow, almost immediately after.
Yeah.
In July 2018.
She's young.
Yeah, she's 47, I think.
Yeah.
46, 47. In July 2018, following the retirement announcement of Anthony Kennedy, she was reportedly one of 3 finalists and the only woman to be considered by Trump as a possible successor to Kennedy. Trump nominated Judge Brett Kavanaugh for the position. Reportedly, although the president liked Barrett, he was concerned about her lack of experience on the bench. At the time, Barrett had been on the bench for less than a year. After Kavanaugh's selection, Barrett was expected to stay in the spotlight as a possible nominee for a future Supreme Court vacancy. Trump is reportedly saving Ruth Bader Ginsburg's seat for Amy Coney Barrett if Ginsburg retires or dies during the Trump presidency. And there it is.
Yeah.
That's what everyone is expecting to happen. And now she's got the experience on the bench.
Yeah, she's got a little more time on the bench. Also interesting, someone should fact check me on this, but I think this is accurate. I think she would also be the first the first individual on the Supreme Court who doesn't have a law degree from an Ivy League school.
Really?
I think it's almost always Yale and Harvard. She went to Notre Dame. Again, I could be wrong on this, or it could be undergraduate rather than graduate. But
do they University of Notre Dame?
Yeah. So I think she would be the first one with a law degree, not from an Ivy League school, who would be on the Supreme Court.
Wow, man.
I don't know that really gets you any blue collar voters. I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's probably like how many angels can dance on the head of the pin in terms
Maybe
of
a
the things
little
that.
bit, yeah, but-
it's a little too in the weeds, but nerdy people like me in DC, I think probably like that stuff.
Thanks for checking out this clip from the Timcast IRL podcast. We do the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. So come back to check us out when we go live. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, hit the notification bell, and we are also available on all podcast platforms for free if you want to listen to us there. Thanks for hanging out, and we will see you all next time.